In the depths of the Texas jail system, a man broke the strict rules and made the once terrifying guards look like kids. A clever genius man who had managed to escape from prison not once, not twice, but a jaw-dropping 4 times in a row in less than 5 years. Each escape was more complicated and brilliant than the last, but the last one, in particular, was about to transcend all boundaries and take the whole story to a new level. It was so extraordinary that some might think it was a script for a crazy movie. Today, our story combines intelligence, planning, and suspense. Our story begins in the early 90s with a man named Stephen J. Russell. At that time, Stephen had no criminal record and worked as an accountant for a company, leading a peaceful life without any troubles. However, Stephen's life took a dramatic turn when his manager unfairly fired him. This incident left him feeling extremely angry and disappointed, especially since he had devoted himself to his work and spent the majority of his time on it. After this incident, Stephen's perspective on life changed completely. He transformed from a law-abiding, peaceful individual into a person filled with anger and hatred. The bitterness he felt towards the system ignited a fire within him, pushing him towards a path that would forever change his destiny. Stephen was known for his intelligence in dealing with people and social situations, so he decided to use this intelligence to become a fraudster. His journey began with small-scale fraud operations targeting insurance companies. He would stage accidents, some of which could be potentially dangerous, in order to collect insurance money. However, in 1992, one of his fraudulent operations was exposed, and he was tracked down and apprehended by the authorities. After his arrest, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison for the uncovered scam. But Stephen had no intention of serving the full term in prison. He immediately began devising an escape plan to execute just 1 month after entering the prison. During this month, Stephen closely observed the guards and workers, studying their routines and movements within the prison. He discovered a simple method to deceive the guards and make his way out of the prison. Stephen noticed that there were workers who occasionally entered the prison to perform certain tasks, and when they left, they simply went to the guards' room, knocked on the glass, and the guards opened the door for them, allowing them to exit easily. What distinguished these workers was that they wore civilian clothes instead of prison attire, and they carried handheld radios. Stephen realized that these workers were not permanent prison employees, but rather individuals who periodically came to carry out their tasks and then left. So he made a deal with someone to smuggle in civilian clothes and a handheld radio for him to use. With these items, Stephen would blend in with the workers, pretending to inspect certain things in the prison while speaking on the radio. After a while, Stephen approached the guards' room and gave them a discreet signal from behind the glass, signaling for them to let him out. And just like that, the guards opened the prison door and Stephen emerged, once again a free man. Following this daring escape, he adopted a new identity and found refuge. Stephen relocated to the state of Florida, where he remained a fugitive for 2 years, from 1992 to 1994. But fate, with its unpredictable twists, had other plans for Stephen. During a daring heist involving insurance check forgery, his luck ran out. Cornered by relentless investigators, he was captured again. And as the truth unraveled, revealing his status as an escaped convict, Stephen found himself back in the heart of the judicial storm. He was sent back to Houston, Texas. Determined to break free from the endless cycle of escape and capture, he made a life-altering decision. This time, he decided to serve his sentence in prison, especially since the remaining term was less than a year. However, after completing his sentence and upon his release, he took up a job as a humble grocery store worker. But it couldn't quench his thirst for something more significant. He wanted to seize a life of luxury and fortune. With steely determination, he charted a new course, leaving behind a world of small-scale fraud. Stephen set his sights on a grander scheme that promised immense wealth and security. He aspired to orchestrate a grand fraud operation that would secure his financial freedom indefinitely. After a short while, the perfect opportunity was about to present itself. An advertisement in the newspaper caught his attention. A chance at a pivotal role as a financial manager in one of the most prestigious health insurance companies in America. The problem was that he had no credentials or work experience in this field whatsoever. However, this was not something that would stop him. The first step he took was to forge his biography, embellishing it with impressive degrees, qualifications, and even previous experience working for various insurance companies, And this was just the first step. After that, Stephen knew that he needed to familiarize himself with the intellectual side of the position. He went on to purchase some financial newspapers, like the Wall Street Journal, and several books on financial management. Stephen had a sharp intelligence with exceptional comprehension skills. He quickly absorbed the information and all the needed details, and he became well-versed in the language and terminology of the financial field. When he arrived for the interview, everything went smoothly. His impressive qualifications and eloquence effortlessly convinced them that he was the perfect fit for the job. As the interview concluded, they eagerly requested the names and numbers of companies he had previously worked with to inquire about his work and performance. Stephen willingly provided them with 3 references, all of which were numbers connected to a call forwarding service. When someone called those numbers, the call would be redirected to Stephen, who would answer it himself. Stephen skillfully answered each call, adopting various personas to fit the fabricated identities of his supposed references. His voice morphed effortlessly, assuming different tones, accents, and even personalities. With each conversation, he wove a tapestry of accolades and commendations, further solidifying the illusion of his impeccable reputation. The unsuspecting callers had no reason to doubt the authenticity of their interactions. Little did they know that they were merely pawns in Stephen's intricate game of deceit. As the company eagerly listened to the praise heaped upon him, they unknowingly sealed their fate. Stephen, the cunning opportunist, had successfully manipulated his way into a position of power and influence within the company, setting the stage for his grand plan to unfold. But unfortunately for him, a foolish move exposed him. He made the mistake of refinancing his house to secure a lower interest rate. The bank employee noticed the substantial amounts of money flowing through his account and wondered where this person was obtaining such large sums. Upon tracing the money, it led back to the healthcare insurance company where Stephen is working. When the news reached the company's CEO, accompanied by the senior executives, they delved into their financial records and discovered the suspicious activities and transfers orchestrated by Stephen within the company. As the investigation unfolded, the dark truth swiftly revealed itself. They quickly knew that he was a former criminal still on parole. The word spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of the district attorney's office in a matter of moments. But before chaos could engulf them all, Stephen sensed the impending danger. Without hesitation, he attempted to escape. He managed to withdraw around $40,000 from several ATMs before his accounts were frozen. However, Stephen, driven by sheer desperation, dared to make a reckless move. He believed he had an opportunity to slip back into the safety of his home, to retrieve some of his valuable belongings. Little did he know, the police were one step ahead, and they had surveilled his residence, patiently waiting for his return. As he approached his doorstep, surprised by them, he was apprehended once again, plunging back into the depths of imprisonment for the second time. And this time, the bail for parole was exorbitant, amounting to $950,000. It seemed impossible for him to obtain such an amount after all his accounts had been frozen. However, Stephen refused to accept his fate. He had no intention of remaining imprisoned. Within less than 2 months of his arrest, he began executing a daring and unconventional escape plan. With nerves of steel, Stephen seized an opportunity within the prison walls and dialed the number for the Harris County Records Office, the very county where he was imprisoned. The person who answered his call was a female employee working in the office. Without hesitation or a shred of doubt, he boldly claimed to be Judge Charles Ham, the very judge who had presided over his case. Like a master manipulator, Stephen wove a tale of intrigue, revealing a shocking twist. He told her that he has an inmate under his jurisdiction by the name of Stephen Russell, and that they conducted a clandestine appellate session, resulting in a remarkable turn of events. The parole bail, previously set at a staggering $950,000, has been drastically reduced to a mere $45,000. The office employee's initial disbelief began to crumble under the weight of Stephen's unwavering certainty. Every word he spoke resonated with a mystifying air of importance, leaving her questioning her own judgment. To seal the illusion, he masterfully divulged intricate case details, painting a convincing portrait of the enigmatic judge. Ultimately, the unsuspecting employee went ahead and modified Stephen's parole bail from $950,000 to $45,000. Now, Stephen faced a race against time to procure the remaining $45,000 quickly, knowing that any suspicious movement might catch the authorities' attention. hence the failure of the plan. Stephen devised a plan to contact a prisoner financing company, even though their conditions didn't typically apply to him. Yet, somehow, he managed to convince them to pay his bail, bending their own policies by imposing certain conditions on prisoners seeking bail. The authorities in Harris County, Texas, soon became aware of Stephen's ruse. It didn't take long for them to catch on, just 5 days after his escape. Unfortunately for Stephen, the police and investigators had him under constant surveillance, monitoring his calls. Through these intercepted conversations, they were able to pinpoint his location. They discovered he had traveled to Florida and narrowed down their search until they realized he was staying at one of the beachfront hotels in West Palm Beach, Florida. That's where they pounced, catching him off guard and arresting him once again. After his subsequent trial, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison, both for embezzlement and his escape. In reality, he could have received a lighter sentence, but he immediately confessed his guilt and accepted the judgment without appeal. Even the prosecutor was taken aback by his quick acceptance, as the sentence was quite severe. Of course, Stephen didn't plan on serving the entirety of his sentence. Even before the trial began, he knew he would escape again, no matter the circumstances. However, this time, they didn't return him to Harris County Jail. Instead, they transferred him to a maximum security prison in Texas. The prison authorities and officials were forewarned about Stephen's cunning and potential attempts to deceive them once more. They had to keep a vigilant watch, but the prison's supposed impenetrability and heightened security led them to believe that everything was under control and that it would be impossible for him to escape again. On the other side, Stephen sat, contemplating, observing, and devising his new plan. The seeds of his new idea began to form when he noticed the presence of a medical wing within the prison. All the doctors and nurses in this wing wore green and blue scrubs, which bore no resemblance to the prison guard, except for the color. Stephen pondered how he could transform his own clothes into the same shade of green. After the laborious task was finally complete, he decided to execute his plan in the morning hours on Friday, the 13th of December, 1996. He first put on the freshly dyed green clothes, and then he wore the white prison uniform on top. He proceeded to have an early breakfast at 4 a.m. Following breakfast, he found a secluded spot within the prison, discarded the white prison attire, and now only wore green clothes, closely resembling the attire of medical professionals. Similar to his previous escape, he walked confidently toward the guards area. Stephen had observed this area for a long time and noticed that every day the female guard spent all morning talking on the phone without paying attention to her surroundings. With unwavering confidence, he approached the guard, greeting her from behind the glass and subtly convincing her to press the button and open the prison door for him. And Stephen became a free man once again. However, he also knew he had to leave the vicinity quickly before his escape was discovered. He decided to approach someone and persuade them to give him a ride to distance himself from the area as quickly as possible. He knocked on the door of one of the houses along the road and encountered the homeowner. Stephen claimed to be a doctor who worked at the prison. He told the homeowner that he had consumed excessive alcohol, crashed his car, and didn't want the prison authorities to find out. He requested a ride, intending to return to his home. Anyway, the man agreed to provide the ride, and Stephen reached the nearby town, where he immediately hailed a taxi. He informed the taxi driver that he is a surgeon at the Texas Medical Center in Houston and had been called for an emergency, desperately needing to be taken there at maximum speed. After reaching the medical center, Stephen told the taxi driver to wait for him to bring the money to his hospital locker to pay him. However, Stephen went and never came back. And so Stephen successfully completed his third escape, leaving the authorities dumbfounded once again. Determined to bring him to justice, they decided to send a special agent after him. This agent's name was Terry Capps. Terry was the leader of the Special Operations Unit within the prison administration. Stephen's escape from their high-security facility for the third time was a real insult to them. Terry was determined to restore his organization's reputation and apprehend Stephen once again. He knew all too well about Stephen's skills in deception and fraud, making it clear that capturing him would not be an easy task. Terry formed a specialized task force with a sole focus on Stephen. Their initial search led them to the town of Hansville, near the prison and its surroundings. However, Stephen was nowhere near the area. As previously mentioned, he took a taxi and headed to Houston, eventually leaving the entire state of Texas and relocating to Mississippi. Specifically, he made his way to the city of Biloxi, as it offered him the opportunity to gamble and get some money. Terry and his team were working tirelessly to track him down. They managed to identify an individual who had been in contact with Stephen in recent days, and finally, they revealed that he is in Biloxi, Mississippi. Immediately, Terry contacted the marshal or sheriff of the city, and he sent them pictures of Stephen. Astonishingly, Stephen's arrest did not take long. The marshal himself stumbled upon him on the street by chance, recognizing him from the photo that Terry sent him. Imagine that of all the places in the city and all the people he could have encountered. He found himself face to face with the marshal holding his picture. Nonetheless, for the third time, he was apprehended and sent back to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, serving his sentence once again. This time, they added an extra 5 years to his term, making it 45 years in total, with no possibility of parole. The earliest chance he could potentially receive parole would be after a minimum of 11 years. Of course, Stephen knew for sure that it was impossible to settle until he found a new way to escape. But this time, the surveillance on him would be intense, making it almost impossible. However, this time, Stephen devised a crazy escape plan in every sense of the word. This plan would not only require trust, but also immense effort. Stephen came up with this plan after researching the conditions for parole and discovering a potential loophole. The loophole he found was a special system that granted parole to inmates suffering from chronic and severe illnesses, so he decided to deceive them and make them believe that he was infected with AIDS. Of course, this was an extremely difficult task that would require a lot of effort, unlike anything he had done before. The first step was to starve himself for several months. Then he had to force himself to vomit, feigning numerous symptoms. He also had to falsify medical records. He managed to bribe a staff member to fabricate his records, making it appear that he had AIDS. Now the symptoms of AIDS were visible to him, and the medical records also indicated that he had the disease. He pretended to be bedridden and ill for 8 months. During this time, none of the prison doctors thought to conduct another examination. They were convinced by the medical records and the initial diagnosis. Stephen's ultimate goal was to convince them that he was on the verge of death so that they would grant him parole and transfer him to an external care facility. The next step was the most difficult and dangerous in the entire operation. He had to put himself in a coma to convince them that the disease had reached its terminal stage and that he was dying. Stephen collected the sedative medications they had given him for several days. Then he took an overdose of these drugs until he lost consciousness and fell into a coma for 4 days. After all the suffering, the prison doctors were convinced that Stephen had only a few weeks left to live. They agreed to his request for parole and sent him to a care center located in the city of Kennedy, in the same state of Texas. But this time, Stephen decided to make a trick to escape their pursuit forever. He decided to fake his own death. He contacted the prison authorities and also the officials at the care center, pretending to be a doctor named Adam Ruiz. He claimed to specialize in AIDS and said that he had an experimental treatment for the disease. He wanted to know if there were any infected inmates suitable for the treatment experiment. Stephen was the perfect choice for the experiment. With the approval of the prison and the care center, Stephen arranged a plan to deliver himself to the doctor. They believed that someone from his family or relatives would be the one to bring him home after his release from the care center. In a cunning move, Stephen managed to forge his own death certificate, signing it with the name of Dr. Adam Ruiz, the very doctor who had assumed his identity. He sent copies of the forged certificate to the care center, the prison, and the officer responsible for parole release. This way, nobody would go looking for him. Stephen successfully escaped from prison for the 4th time, in a way that was both perfect and unprecedented. Finally, he became free, and no one was searching for him. After a few weeks, he regained his vigor and strength. But contrary to expectations, he returned to his old ways of deceit and manipulation. This time, he needed to forge a lawyer's ID card. Unfortunately, he chose to use his exceptional intelligence in the wrong way again. However, he entered a printing shop and asked the owner to create a card resembling those of attorneys. The owner had suspicions but assisted him nonetheless, providing him with the requested card. As Stephen took the card and left, the printing shop owner sensed that something was wrong, so he decided to contact the officer in Houston and inform him of what had happened. He also sent a copy of the card he had made for Stephen to the authorities. When the officer saw the picture, he felt a strong sense of resemblance to the fugitive, Stephen. Immediately, he contacted Terry. Terry was taken aback when he heard the news. He had believed that Stephen was still serving his 45-year sentence in prison. He quickly reached out to the prison, which informed him that Stephen had been diagnosed with AIDS a year ago and that his condition had worsened, leading to his parole release. In the end, Stephen died outside the prison after suffering from the disease. Terry couldn't believe that Stephen had pulled it off again and escaped. Immediately, Terry assembled a new team to track down Stephen and apprehend him. A few weeks after Stephen faked his death, he went to a bank in Dallas, pretending to be a millionaire and attempting to secure a loan of $75,000. However, the bank's vice president grew suspicious of his story and asked him to wait while he went inside to contact the FBI and report him. Sensing trouble, Stephen felt that there was something wrong about to happen, so he decided to distract their attention and feigned a stroke, calling for an ambulance and swiftly leaving the premises. However, once the report was made, he was placed under guard in a hospital room until the FBI arrived to investigate his case. But once again, Stephen used his cunning and self-confidence. From his hospital bed, he called the hospital administration, pretending to be an FBI agent, and informed them that he was being released, claiming that the investigation had concluded and that he was no longer under suspicion. After some time, the hospital administration informed the FBI that they had received a call from the FBI instructing them to release Stephen. The FBI agents were surprised, as they had never made such a call. All that remained of Stephen's belongings was his driver's license with his photo on it, confirming that he was in Dallas. Immediately, Terry and his team mobilized in the city and started searching for him in local hotels. And they discovered that he had stayed in multiple hotels and that he was constantly moving from one to another. During their investigation, Terry and his team would interrogate various sources until they reached an insurance company. It seemed that Stephen had been in contact with them and intended to deceive them by sending forged documents via fax. This information allowed them to narrow down the search by tracing the fax number, revealing that Stephen was located in a specific area of the city. Terry requested assistance from the local police department in the area to aid in the search and set up an ambush for Stephen while he used the fax machine. Terry knew that Stephen would likely use it again to send additional documents to the insurance company, intending to deceive them once more. He anticipated that Stephen would use the same fax machine, but the plan took an unexpected turn when two detectives suddenly found Stephen walking in the street, right before they could execute the ambush. They swiftly apprehended him, leaving Stephen once again in custody. For the fourth time, and after the significant embarrassment he had caused the authorities in Texas, they decided to make an example of him and give him harsh sentences. Firstly, he received a sentence of 144 years in prison, with no chance of parole. He was then placed in the highest security unit, typically reserved for the most dangerous killers and criminals, despite Stephen's crimes not involving violence. In this unit, prisoners spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, with only 1 hour for exercise and personal hygiene, all under strict surveillance. Even to this day, Stephen remains in the same high-security unit, where he has been serving his sentence since 1998. And here, we reach the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, click the bell icon to receive notifications for new videos.